In the bustling heart of Valley Ridge High, beneath the golden rays of the sun, Jake stepped into the schoolyard in his scuffed old sneakers. They weren't just any sneakers, they were oversized and worn out, a relic of his childhood. Most kids had the latest styles. They wore shoes that shimmered or glowed, but Jake, he had those beaten-up sneakers that looked like they'd seen better days. As he walked, his shoes squeaked a little, and some kids noticed. Emma snickered from a group of friends. Her bright laughter rang through the air like a bell. It was a playful jab, but it stung more than she knew. As the laughter echoed around him, Jake felt a wave of humiliation wash over him. "You can't judge a person by their shoes," his mom used to say, but try telling that to high school kids. They were quick to form opinions. His confidence dipped a little lower each time someone pointed, laughed, or whispered behind his back. Each chuckle added weight to his heart. But what Jake didn't know was that beneath those shoes was someone who could step into great things, a person waiting for the right moment to shine. Days turned into weeks. Each passing day brought a new round of teasing, especially whenever the student council elections were mentioned. Candidates wore shiny shoes, tailored suits, and smiles that reflected success. Jake felt even smaller, but he did something unexpected. Instead of retreating, he decided to run for president. His friends were shocked. They asked. The truth was, Jake had ideas. He wanted to bring more clubs to the school, make the cafeteria food better, and create a safe space for everyone, not just the popular kids. But the laughter lingered in his mind like a shadow he could not shake off. The day of the debates arrived. The auditorium buzzed with energy, filled with students excited to support their favorites. As Jake took the stage, he felt his heart race. In front of him stood Emma, dressed sharp in her stylish outfit, talking confidently about what she'd do as president. More events, more parties, more fun. The students cheered, captivated by her charm. When it was Jake's turn, he stepped forward, pushing past his nerves. "I might not have the latest shoes," he started, his voice shaky but steady. "I have a vision for our school. I want everyone to feel included, regardless of what they wear or who they are." A few students exchanged glances, surprised, some even nodded. They had never seen Jake like this. As he shared his ideas, he painted pictures with his words. He talked about clubs nobody had thought to start, about events beyond the usual games, about being kind and supportive. He felt the mood shift in the room, saw interest sparking in faces that had once laughed at his shoes. As he finished, applause broke out. It was hesitant at first, but then it grew stronger, more genuine. Jake stepped off the stage, a hopeful smile on his face. Maybe he could do this. Maybe those scuffed sneakers meant he was ready to put in the work and fight for every kid at the school, not just the ones with the right shoes. Still, he knew he had an uphill battle. Emma was well-liked, charismatic, and had the shoes to match her confidence. Days blurred into nights as Jake set up meetings, wrote speeches, and talked to fellow students. But the deeper he went, the more unexpected friends he made, and the tighter the bond he built with those in the shadows. They began to share their stories of silently dealing with their own struggles, their own insecurities. Jake discovered he wasn't alone. As the election day approached, tension filled the air. Whispers floated around the school. Would the unfashionable kid actually win against someone like Emma? The students who had once laughed at him began to question their own views. Some started to realize that they had more in common with Jake than they thought. His vision gave them hope, a belief that a better place was within reach. Finally, the day of the voting arrived. Students lined up to cast their votes, excitement buzzing like electricity. Jake walked into the gym, heart pounding. He glanced at the voting box. Each slip of paper held not just a name, but a choice for a community they wanted. Regardless of the outcome, he had done something he never thought possible. He had spoken up and fought for what he believed in. When it came time for the results, the auditorium buzzed with anticipation. The principal stood on stage, holding an envelope with the final tally. She opened the envelope slowly, building tension in the room. Jake's heart raced, palms sweaty, unsure if he could bear the answer. She announced, and the room erupted. Shock and joy mingled in the air. He could hardly believe it. As students cheered, he realized something monumental had shifted, not just for him, but for everyone. Emma's initial laughter was now a distant echo, like a harmless wave in the background of a much grander sea. Standing at the podium, he looked out at familiar faces and some he hadn't noticed before. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I want to promise each of you that I will work hard for us all. Shoes don't define who we are." As the cheers filled the space, he turned to see Emma. She stood among the crowd, her smile genuine now. The laughter that once rang loudly had been replaced with respect. She clapped, and it wasn't just a formality. It was a recognition of something more significant. Over the next months, Jake took his role seriously. Under his leadership, clubs flourished, activities came alive, and bonds grew deeper. Students began to feel a sense of belonging, the buzz of community buzzing around like a warm glow. Each time he saw kids wearing shoes just like his, he felt an unshakable pride. One day, he spotted Emma sitting alone at a table. "Good," she replied thoughtfully. "You really changed things, you know." Jake heard her honesty. "It's amazing what happens when you start to see everyone's worth," he replied. Emma nodded, and for the first time they shared a laugh together, but it wasn't at anyone's expense. It was a laugh born from understanding, respect, and shared growth. As months rolled on, Jake's shoes remained the same, but he saw them differently now. No longer did they represent shame or embarrassment. Instead, they echoed strength and resilience. They symbolized the journey he had taken, the friends he had made, and the idea that one shouldn't be ashamed of who they are. In the end, Jake learned something profound. The world may sometimes laugh at the surface, but true change rises from a heart focused on unity. His old sneakers had brought him places he never imagined, and with them, he found a community that stood together. A school filled with laughter, not as a punchline, but as the sound of togetherness. And in that, Jake became more than just a president. He became a leader, a friend, and a symbol of true change. Jake stood at the edge of the gymnasium, his heart racing like a drum as he watched the candidates for student council president take their places at the front. The bright lights shone down, illuminating their crisp suits and polished shoes, all except for him. He shifted uncomfortably in his oversized sneakers, shoes that had been through years of adventure and mischief, now a source of embarrassment. "Those shoes are a joke," Emma whispered loud enough for others to hear, her laughter slicing through the air like a knife. It wasn't just a laugh, it was the kind of laughter that made others join in. The crowd erupted, a sea of giggles and chuckles as Jake felt the heat rise in his cheeks. It was supposed to be a routine day, a day where kids expressed their hopes for leadership. But Jake's mind was filled with doubt. Sure, he had ideas, great ones really. He wanted more clubs, he wanted activities that brought people together, but here he was, the kid with the shoes that had become a punchline. But standing there with every eye on him, he felt trapped by the surface. The candidates began their speeches, each one polished and sharp. Shouted one girl, her voice booming with confidence. More dances, shouted another. Each promise echoed like a magic spell, capturing attention and applause. And there was Emma, glowing with charisma, capturing everyone's admiration effortlessly. As Jake watched, a thought sparked inside him. He couldn't just stand back and let this happen without trying. With a deep breath, he decided right there in that moment that he would run for president too. His friend Tommy's voice broke through his thoughts. "That's just it," Jake said, his brows furrowing with determination. With that, he walked away from the jeers, leaving them behind, feeling stronger with each step. Jake spent the next few days writing down ideas, his passion igniting a fire within him. He wanted to change the way things were, the way students felt. It wasn't about the shoes or the clothes, it was about community and connection. Behind the laughter, he found his purpose. The day of the debate arrived. Jake could hear the whispers as he entered the auditorium. He caught sight of Emma. She was a storm of confidence, wearing her stylish outfit with a smile that lit up the room. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum roll as he climbed up to the podium. Standing in front of the students, he felt the weight of their stares, some supportive, some skeptical. "Hi, everyone," he started, his voice trembling. He glanced down at his worn-out shoes. "But I believe we can make our school better for everyone." He could see eyebrows raising, some heads nodding in agreement. "I want to create clubs that matter to you." Each word he spoke was a pebble dropping into a pond, sending ripples through the crowd. Jake continued pouring out his heart, speaking about building safer spaces where everyone felt heard. As he finished, for the first time, the echo of applause filled the room. It was cautious at first, but grew as if students were waking up to a new reality. Jake stepped back from the podium, feeling a flicker of hope, but the storm of emotions didn't calm. Days passed, and the closer they got to the elections, the louder the whispers became. Emma's friends would say, yet each time he walked the halls, he saw more and more students wearing those shoes like his old, battered sneakers, perhaps not as proud, but now seeing shared experience. As the votes neared, the tension thickened like humidity before a storm. Jake huddled with his friends, tossing ideas in the air, brainstorming ways to rally support. Excitement crackled around them, a feeling of unity that began to blossom with each conversation. The day of the voting arrived, and students lined up, casting their slips of paper into the box. Jake watched as Emma moved through the crowd like royalty, voices swirling around her like confetti. But the flickering flame of hope lit inside Jake. He believed in what he stood for. He wasn't just a pair of shoes, he was a vision for change. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The auditorium was packed, a restless energy filling the air as the principal took to the stage, clutching a sealed envelope with the results inside. Students leaned forward, anticipation coursing through the space like electricity. She paused, allowing the tension to build even more. Silence. For just a heartbeat, it was like time stopped. Then the auditorium erupted. Cheers and claps filled the space, drowning out the whispers that had once filled his ears. He stood frozen, a swirling mix of disbelief and joy flooding him. Emma stepped closer, and for the first time he saw her smile without any hint of mockery. "Congratulations, Jake." Jake blinked, still awash in the unexpected tide of victory. This was no longer just about him or his shoes. It meant something deeper. It was about the kids who were often overlooked, the ones feeling lost and alone. During his presidency, Jake threw himself into the role. He organized events that truly brought students together. Clubs blossomed, laughter filled the halls, and students began to understand each other beyond the surface. discovered common interests, resembled one another's struggles, and importantly began to open the door to kindness. He encountered obstacles along the way, frustrations and setbacks. Emma even ran for a committee position to challenge him. "We can't just have all these changes," she argued during a heated meeting. "Tradition is only as good as the joy it brings," Jake countered. The board took notice of him, of his passion and commitment. They saw beyond his shoes to the voice that resonated within. Slowly, the transformation started happening. Students felt heard. They saw that being different was a strength, not a reason for ridicule. As the year continued, Jake found himself reflecting on how far he had come. He no longer felt the weight of his sneakers. Instead, they felt like a badge of honor, a reminder that he had once stood at the edge, wrestling with insecurity. Now he stood tall, grounded in purpose and clarity. With the school year winding down, a celebratory assembly plan for the end began to take shape. A showcase of creativity, talents, and unity brought forth by students, each shining in their unique way. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as the day dawned. It was filled with vibrant banners crafted by students, showcasing strong messages of friendship and acceptance. Laughter echoed down every hallway, a joyful sound that was becoming the soundtrack of Valley Ridge High. As he looked out at the crowd of students, each one with their own story wrapped up within them, he spotted Emma in the front row. She was clapping, urging others to join in the cheers, her laughter now light and infectious. Jake's heart swelled with gratitude and pride as he stepped up to the microphone. "Today isn't just about celebration, it's about connection. Remember that every story, every struggle, every laugh, they matter." Amidst the thrumming excitement, he spotted familiar shoes here and there, old, worn, new, each one now a symbol of strength, resilience, and togetherness. At that moment, the forgotten laughter of doubt melted away into newfound respect. It became clear that when hidden behind the laughter, a spark of hope can ignite something truly powerful. Something beautiful had emerged from the shadows. Jake had created a community, a place where shoes didn't define worth. Instead, it was the unity, the kindness, and the strength developed from shared experiences that formed the fabric of their lives. In that electric atmosphere of celebration, Jake realized something monumental. Sometimes the deepest contributions come not from polished shoes, but from the heart that beats within. Each scuffed shoe had a story to tell, and together they were writing a new chapter filled with laughter, acceptance, and ultimately, love. Jake stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down his shirt for what felt like the millionth time. As he caught a glimpse of himself, his heart sank. There he was, tall and awkward, with an earnest look in his eyes, but all he could see were his shoes-faded, mismatched sneakers that had seen better days. They didn't shine or match the polished look of the other student council candidates. Just a little scuff on the left toe reminded him of the soccer game last month. "Those shoes are so ridiculous," someone had said. It had been Emma, her voice ringing out in laughter, echoing down the school hallway like a mocking bell. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now standing there, the memory bound him like chains. Classes were over, but the energy in the school buzzed with excitement for the upcoming student council elections. The gymnasium, decked with colorful posters and streamers, pulsed with voices. Candidates were making final preparations, some practicing speeches, others gliding through the crowd with confident smiles, each one dressed in designer clothes and polished shoes. And there was Jake, feeling like a ghost in a world of vibrant colors. As he stepped into the gym, the chatter faded for a split second. All eyes shifted toward him. A few students snickered, and Jake felt that old familiar sting of shame creeping back, but he was there to change things. He was going to run for president. A friend asked, incredulous. "I know," Jake replied, his doubt trying to creep in, but he pushed it aside. With every passing minute, the candidates shared their visions, sweeping audiences up in their words about parties and fun events. Emma stood out, commanding the stage, pontificating on school spirit and unity, and every student seemed to hang on her every word. But in the corner of the room, Jake was forming a plan of his own. When it was his turn, the trembling in his legs threatened to conquer him, yet he straightened his back and walked to the microphone. Hush fell over the crowd, eyes narrowing with curiosity. He took a breath, the weight of his worn shoes grounding him as he planted them firmly on the stage. "Hi everyone, I'm Jake," he started, his voice shaking but determined. "I know I don't look like the others up here, but I believe our school can grow into a place where everyone feels welcome." He glanced at Emma, whose eyes flickered with amusement. "My shoes may be old, but they carry stories." He could hear faint whispers ripple through the crowd. Through the discomfort, "I want us to start clubs that interest everyone, to have a voice, to learn from each other." As he spoke, hesitance began to lift from the air. He looked into the eyes of his peers and saw a spark. Some nodded along, their expressions shifting. He finished, heart pounding, and stepped back, unsure of how the moment had shifted. The aftermath was unpredictable. Some laughed behind his back, but others approached him with interest. "That was pretty cool, Jake," one girl said. "I never thought you'd run." Something was stirring in the atmosphere, a shift, a hint of hope. Yet the days leading to the election were a roller coaster of emotions. Jake felt that familiar heaviness of insecurity creeping back in. Rumors sparked about him from corners of the cafeteria to the hallways. Emma's laughter lingered like a haunting shadow, but with every unfounded comment, a few brave voices started to align with him. Students he never expected began to speak out, sharing stories of their own ridicule and similar experiences. Jake found solace in their transparency. It was as if they were joining forces, each breath igniting sparks of camaraderie and understanding. On the day of the voting, adrenaline surged through Jake's body as students filed into the crowded gym, casting their ballots. He stood to the side, watching, wondering how it had come to this. Hope clashed with uncertainty. Each student dropping a slip into the box felt significant, like a vote for change. Finally, the moment arrived. Results were to be announced. Silence enveloped the gym as the principal stepped up, a sealed envelope in hand. Whispers turned into hushed anticipation. The applause echoed like a heartbeat through the room. She broke off, eyes dancing over the crowd. For a brief moment, the world stopped. Would it be possible? The room erupted. Cheers swallowed him whole, but it was accompanied by disbelief. The weight of laughter turned into a weight of cheers. He stood in shock, breathless, a landslide of thoughts rushing through his mind. Emma stood in the crowd, eyes wide, her smile genuine. "Wow, you really did it," she said as she approached him. "Thanks," Jake replied, still feeling surreal. As the dust began to settle, he took to the stage again, though this time it felt different. He was no longer just the boy in the sneakers. "I promised to listen to every voice here," he declared. And it began. Under Jake's leadership, students flourished. Clubs sprung up for everything under the sun: painting, poetry, debate, all colors of personalities flooding the cafeteria and hallways. With enthusiasm blooming, he watched students find their passions and voices. The laughter that once stung and echoed now resonated with camaraderie and friendship, yet the journey was far from smooth. Challenges arose. Emma, once a detractor, found herself questioning the changes. "We should stick to the plan," she exclaimed during a meeting. "Tradition doesn't have to mean exclusion," Jake countered, keeping his focus steady. And the more they debated, the more they began to see each other's perspectives. Rather than a battle, it turned into a dialogue, awakening both sides to understanding. Days turned into weeks, and the excitement surrounding the student body remained electric. Every event buzzed with a sense of belonging, from open mic nights to talent shows, where students finally felt free to express themselves. The auditorium filled with students sharing heartfelt stories, creating a mosaic of experiences that resonated deep within their hearts. Jake sat in the audience, a lump in his throat as he watched his peers step into the spotlight, their vulnerability creating a bridge of connection. It didn't matter what shoes they were wearing, it was their stories that shone. Students poured out tales of struggles with insecurities, moments when they felt unseen. Laughter interspersed with tears became a healing balm within those walls. Connections were forged, walls came down, and from there the seeds of empathy began to sprout. Yet, Jake had a moment of doubt. Standing outside the cafeteria one afternoon, he overheard a few students still making jokes about his shoes, but instead of anger, he felt a pang of sadness. But then he remembered that feeling of transformation, a flicker of strength igniting within him. He walked over to confront it. "Hey, you all, you can laugh at my shoes, but those same shoes led me here." Suddenly, the laughter quieted, replaced by bewilderment. The impact of his words had fallen like a soft snowfall, lingering in the air. Jake took a moment to breathe in, allowing vulnerability to flow through. "We're all here figuring it out together." Those words didn't just resonate with them, they sparked something new. One by one, students began to share their own vulnerabilities, truths that connected lives. Created a wave of openness, each sharing bringing them closer together, shrinking the distance that once divided them. As that school year approached its end, plans formed for the year-end celebration, a culmination of everything they had built. The cafeteria transformed into a vibrant display of colors, a tapestry of student talent. It became a festival of unity, with art, music, and laughter flowing freely. The day arrived with anticipation hanging heavy in the air. Jake stood on the stage, surveying the crowd, and his heart swelled. Friends gathered, stories shared, and laughter echoed, not as a punchline, but as a tapestry of human connection intertwining with hope. "Today is a celebration of all of us," he began, holding the microphone firmly. "Every voice matters. Our differences carry strength." He spotted Emma in the audience, smiling and clapping, no longer a rival but an ally. He continued, "These shoes may be faded, but they remind me that every journey is valuable." And when he paused, the energy sparked again, sending excitement racing through the audience like a live wire. The auditorium erupted in applause, and cheers echoed around the walls, resonant proof of transformation. As that final year drew to a close, Jake realized that what had begun as a struggle with laughter had transformed into a celebration of unity. Every story shared, every pair of shoes that walked through those halls, represented the heart of it, all a community forged through understanding, kindness, and courage. In that moment, Jake had not just found himself. He had become a leader who moved beyond appearances, shining light into every corner, creating a vibrant tapestry that redefined not just a school, but forever changed the narrative of connection. Old shoes no longer were just a joke. They represented a journey, a powerful reminder that the strength of community emerges when we learn to lift each other up. Jake stood at the front of the school gymnasium, the bright lights glaring down on him. His heart raced as he clutched the microphone tightly in his hands. The buzzing crowd quieted, their eager faces peering at him like a sea of curious students, some hopeful, some skeptical, but all of them, their eyes were on him, and he could practically feel the weight of their expectations. Someone whispered, never intending for him to hear. A ripple of laughter followed. It shot through Jake like a cold wind, sending waves of heat to his face. He knew exactly who had laughed. Emma, the girl with the perfect hair, the fast smile, and the sharply polished shoes that gleamed under the gym lights. In that very moment, his thoughts drifted to his own shoes. They were old, worn out and scuffed, the blue fabric barely holding together in the places where he had pushed the limits. They didn't match the sleek boots and shiny loafers surrounding him. He felt like a bad joke standing there in that crowd. Emma had teased earlier in the day, her voice dripping with amusement as her friends giggled around her. The laughter had hit him harder than any punch. It lingered in his mind as he prepared for this moment, yet here he was, ready to face the audience, ready to prove that he could stand out in ways that mattered. "Hi, I'm Jake," he started, trying to sound confident. His voice trembled, and for a second he wanted nothing more than to sink into the floor and disappear into the shadows, but something deep inside him pushed back. "I believe we can create a school where everyone feels they belong. Where we celebrate our differences," he continued, pulling strength from the echo of his own words. He glanced down, nervous but resolute. "Those shoes have carried me through countless adventures." A few heads turned, their eyes reflecting curiosity rather than ridicule. "I want a place where we push each other to explore new interests." As he spoke, he saw heads nodding, even Emma's gaze softened for a moment. The laughter dimmed, replaced by a sense of intrigue. It felt like he was breaking through, like his words were unraveling the preconceived notions that had tied him down. The debate ended, but the effects lingered. Days turned into weeks as the election drew closer and Jake's confidence began to change. Students approached him more often, curious about his ideas. They began opening up, sharing their own dreams, their own stories. "I wish we could have more activities. The usual dances and football games feel dull," said Sandra, someone Jake had known since freshman year but had never really talked to until now. Jake couldn't help but agree. He wanted to reshape their school into a space where every single student felt included. A place where laughter didn't come at someone's expense but as recognition of shared experience. He remembered the weight of Emma's laughter. He refused to let that define him. As days went by, Jake worked tirelessly on his campaign. He organized meetings, reached out to others, and built a group of supporters who believed in his vision. Suddenly, he found himself with unexpected allies. He felt empowered, and the scuffed shoes that once brought him shame now felt like a part of something bigger, something meaningful. The day of the election arrived, the gym bustling with energy. Students crowded in, popcorn in hand, ready for the results. Jake's heart raced again. Would they see him for what he offered? Would they hear him? The tension in the air was electric, and as whispers filled the room, Jake tried to focus on the friendships he'd made, the momentum behind his mission. When the principal finally stepped onto the stage, the gym fell silent. "We've had a fantastic election season," she began, her voice ringing like a bell. With a flourish, she opened the envelope and paused, glancing out at the crowd. "The next president of Valley Ridge High is..." Silence hung in the air for a breath, then exploded into cheers. The noise echoed off the walls, washing over him like a warm embrace. Jake could hardly believe it. In that moment, the laughter that once chased him felt far away. He stepped to the podium, the weight of his shoes now grounded in purpose. He shouted, the excitement sparking in his veins. "This isn't just about me, it's about all of us." The applause resonated like a victory anthem in his heart, but he knew the real work was just beginning. From that day forward, Jake poured his energy into a wave of change. He reached out to students from all grades, asking for their input. What did they want? What issues affected them? He gathered ideas, weaving them into plans that spoke to the very heart of their community. It was inspiring to see other students light up, sharing their passions, realizing they matter. Together, they formed clubs ranging from art to science to environmental activism. Jake found joy in the unity it created. He watched as the fabric of the school changed, pulling in students who had once felt alone, invisible. It was magical to witness each new face, each new story, each new smile unite under a common purpose. But of course, not everything was easy. Resistance surfaced, especially from Emma and her friends who felt the changes diluted tradition. At a meeting one afternoon, she spoke up, her voice steady and frustrated. "Can't we just have fun without changing everything?" Jake stood tall, his heart pounding. "Emma, this isn't about taking away what we love. It's about adding layers to it. It's about making sure everyone knows they aren't left out," he replied, his own frustration mixing with hope. Something shifted in that moment. Emma's expression faltered as she heard voices rising up in support. Maybe her laughter had masked deeper uncertainties, and she began to listen. As the months passed, friendships blossomed and new bonds formed. Jake embraced a wave of spirit that flooded the school. Events like Unity Day and Open Mic Night became popular, creating platforms for expression and celebration. The laughter that echoed now felt like a shared heartbeat. The gym had been beautifully decorated, with lights strung up and colorful streamers fluttering in the air. Jake was busy welcoming students, making sure everyone felt included. It was a chaotic swirl of laughter and chatter, and just as he felt on top of the world, he noticed Emma standing alone at the edge. His heart sank. In that moment, he remembered how she had laughed at his shoes. He called out, waving her over. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but something flickered in her eyes. Slowly, she stepped forward, but her shoulders were still tense. "Thanks for inviting me," she said softly, her voice hesitant. As the night unfolded, Jake kept glancing at her. One by one, new faces began gathering around Emma, drawn in by the atmosphere. They started chatting, sharing stories, and even laughing together. It was heartwarming to see, and Jake realized this was the very change he had fought for. Then came the moment that would solidify everything. During a quiet moment, Jake approached Emma, pulling her aside. "You know, I appreciate your honesty. It pushed me to step up to show that we can do this together." Her eyes widened slightly as if the words surprised her. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Jake nodded. "I get it, it's scary, but embracing change doesn't mean rejecting what we've loved." Emma took a deep breath, her demeanor softening. "I see that now. I just want to make sure we don't lose our identity." "And we won't," Jake replied sincerely. "Our identity is built on every single one of us." Her smile returned, no longer a mask of dismissiveness, but a genuine expression of partnership. "Maybe we can combine our ideas." That simple exchange marked a turning point for both of them. They began to collaborate, integrating tradition with new ideas, allowing the student body to flourish. Laughter transformed from a weapon into a bridge between them, and Emma found her strength alongside Jake's vision. As the end of the school year approached, Jake's heart swelled with pride. He watched how far they had all come, how far they had grown together. The ongoing changes he had fought for were now embedded in the culture of the school. Then came the year-end celebration. Jake stood at the podium once more, looking out at the joyful faces, surrounded by the very students who had lifted each other through shared laughter and stories. The air sparkled with excitement, and the pulse of hope felt palpable. He proclaimed, excitement bubbling inside him. "We started this journey as individuals coming together, but now we thrive as one dynamic community." The applause broke out, resonating through the air like a chorus of empowerment. As he stepped back, he felt the warmth of genuine connection. Those old sneakers, no longer just a source of embarrassment, had become a symbol of resilience, a reminder of where he came from, of how far he had traveled. Jake's journey had taken him from laughter that stung to a leadership marked by connection, acceptance, and above all, love. In that moment, he realized it hadn't just been about running for president. It had become about building bridges where once there were none, stitching together stories to create a masterpiece of community. Through vulnerability, acceptance, and courage, he had learned that shoes could be worn, stories shared, and laughter turned into a celebration of togetherness. And as he scanned the crowd, he smiled, finally seeing every face as a part of one beautiful, bright future they had all created together. Jake stood in the bustling school hallway, feeling the cool metal of his locker against his back as uncertainty washed over him. All around, students laughed, gossip flowed like water, and energy crackled in the air, but Jake felt like an outsider. It was the day the students would announce their candidacies for student council president, and he was about to step into the spotlight wearing his well-worn sneakers. Emma's voice echoed through the crowd, sharp and cutting, drawing curious glances. Her laughter rang out like a fire alarm, piercing through the hum of conversation. Jake's heart raced, the sting of embarrassment wrapping around him like a heavy blanket. He could feel the eyes on him, the laughter like an invisible weight tugging at his confidence. They were just sneakers, a few sizes too big, beaten up from years of use, a reminder of childhood adventures, but today they felt like a glaring blemish. As more students joined in on the mocking laughter, Jake looked down at his shoes, wishing he could sink into the floor and disappear. He had always wanted to be someone who could inspire change, but here he was, crushed by a pair of shoes. The loudspeaker crackled to life, cutting through the laughter. "Good morning, students." Right, Jake muttered to himself, trying to shake off the laughter still echoing in his ears. But something deep inside him flickered with determination. He had ideas that didn't need a flashy wardrobe to shine, just the courage to share them. "I'm going to run," he whispered, the decision solidified in his mind, vibrant and clear. His friend Tommy teased, but Jake didn't waver. He needed to show people there was more than what met the eye, that real strength came from within. The days rolled on. Jake spent hours crafting a speech that spoke to his vision for their school, a place he deeply cared about. He wanted to make it a home for everyone, whether they wore stylish shoes or, like him, sneakers that didn't make a statement. As he wrote, he poured his heart into every word, crafting a message that revolved around unity, respect, and kindness. The debate day arrived like a storm brewing on the horizon. The gym was packed with students buzzing with anticipation. As Jake stepped up to the microphone, he felt the weight of every eye on him, suffocating beneath that gaze. Emma was sitting front and center, her confident smile both intimidating and inspiring. "Hey everyone, I'm Jake," he started, his voice trembling just slightly. "And I'm running for student council president. I may not have the latest shoes, but I believe our school can be a place where everyone feels welcomed." He paused, taking a deep breath to steady his resolve. There was a ripple of interest in the crowd, and for a moment, he felt a surge of confidence. I can't promise fancy events, but I can promise we'll work to change things for the better. We'll create clubs and bring exciting activities that don't leave anyone behind. As he spoke, Jake saw some nodding in agreement while others looked skeptical. Emma chuckled under her breath, but the laughter around her faded. With the debate finished, he stepped back into the fray, uncertain how to decipher the mixed reactions. It was a whirlwind of emotions: hope, fear, excitement. Students began approaching him, a small group forming, curious about his vision. "I liked what you said," one girl admitted shyly. "I think we need those changes too," another added, stoking the flickering flame of validation Jake felt. As the weeks rolled on, the campaign kicked into full gear. Meetings were set, ideas bounced around like a basketball on the court. Those old, beaten sneakers became a symbol of resilience, grounding him as he fought for every voice that echoed with doubts similar to his own. But the whispers never fully faded. "He'll never win," they would say. Emma seemed to lead the charge, her laughter sometimes ringing out among a crowd gathered in the cafeteria. Yet amidst it all, students began to rally behind Jake. They too had their stories of exclusion and feeling like misfits. For the first time, Jake felt less alone. Then came the day of the voting. The gym was electric as students lined up to cast their ballots, tension mounting like clouds rolling in before a storm. Jake stood nervously by the voting box, adrenaline coursing through him, hoping for a glimmer of belief from everyone he had connected with. The principal's voice echoed. Silence fell like a thick curtain, every breath held in anticipation. The principal opened the envelope, peering out at the optimistic crowd. A moment of stunned silence stretched time, then chaos exploded as cheers filled the gym, echoing against the walls. Jake barely processed it, shock rippling through him. He thought as he wove through the crowd. His heart raced, arms lifted high in triumph. It was surreal. He had become more than just the kid in those shoes. As he climbed back up to the podium, everything around him faded into the background. He yelled, the adrenaline surging through every vein. "We're all in this together." After the clamor of applause settled, Jake stepped down, reality hitting him hard. Suddenly, his mission felt more tangible. The challenges lined up like competitors on a starting line. The month turned into a series of victories and challenges. Jake organized clubs, creating safe spaces where all students could express themselves. It felt incredible to see students who had once sat alone now laughing and forming friendships, but resistance still lurked beneath the surface. One day, Emma confronted him during a meeting. She questioned, her tone sharp, "You're changing everything too much." Raising an eyebrow almost instinctively, Jake replied, "Emma, we're not losing what we love, we're just adding to it a better version." Instead of igniting conversation, it brought forth a wall. Emma fired back. That wall pushed harder on their communication. Conflicts ignited. Disagreements heightened the stakes, leaving Jake feeling isolated even with his allies. Weeks later, tensions rose throughout the school, and Jake noticed the divide growing. It was during one of those moments of acute frustration that he remembered the laughter that once echoed in the gym. As he thought back, he decided to confront the tough conversations head-on. At their next meeting, he invited Emma to join them. He spoke clearly, drawing everyone's attention. "We need to understand each other if we're going to move forward. Emma has concerns, and I want to hear them." As Emma spoke, articulating her fears that the essence of what they cherished was being diluted, something changed in the room. Jake realized that changing the way they interacted could make all the difference, and that involved listening more than speaking. By the end of the meeting, they found a way to meld old traditions with new ideas, creating a plan that encompassed everyone's voices. Sharing their stories slowly opened new doors, allowing them to hear each other out rather than argue. From then on, conversations shifted. The tangible wall of division started to crumble. Inspired by the unity they had cultivated, Jake and Emma worked together on the next school-wide event, a relay of stories where students shared their experiences both on stage and off. The day arrived filled with anticipation. Students gathered, eager to lend their voices to the tapestry of shared lives. Laughter and tears morphed into scenes of vulnerability, showcasing the rawness of the teenage experience. Jake watched people pour their hearts out, giving that invisible thread once tangled a new weave, rich in connection and understanding. He turned his face to Emma, and there it was, a shared smile of accomplishment, a realization sparking between them that they were better together. At that moment, he understood the real power of what they had built. It wasn't just about leadership or ideas, it was about building relationships and nurturing connections. He had transformed from that kid in worn-out sneakers into someone who inspired others to embrace their true selves, whether that meant standing together in the spotlight or offering quiet support from the sidelines. As the school year drew to a close, Jake stood in the gym, now transformed to celebrate unity, the air filled with bright decorations and laughter. He felt proud of what they had achieved, a community built on understanding and acceptance. Taking a deep breath, he stepped up to the podium, feeling the familiar electricity hum in the air. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces, rich with stories. This journey has shown us that our shoes, no matter how scuffed or shiny, carry our stories. The applause filled the space, thunderous and alive, echoing through the hearts of everyone in the gym. In that moment of shared triumph, Jake realized something profound. Sometimes laughter could wound, but it could also heal when it became a thread connecting shared experiences. That day he learned that true leadership didn't come from flashy shoes or bold personalities. It radiated from bridges built through vulnerability, from bonds formed in understanding, and through the courage to be real. As for Emma standing beside him, she had transformed from the girl who once laughed at his shoes into a collaborator, a partner, and a force of change, a living testament to the fact that true growth arises from embracing one another's stories. Together they had forged a remarkable legacy. In that very moment, Jake understood. Every step, every journey mattered, weaving their lives into a rich narrative of community, resilience, and connection, where laughter truly thrived as a celebration of unity. Jake stood at the edge of the school courtyard, watching the midday sun spill over the crowd of students gathered around the main entrance, laughter and chatter swirling like a summer breeze. For most, this was just another day at Valley Ridge High, but for Jake, today felt different. It was the day he had chosen to step out of the shadows and run for student council president. Yet, as he glanced at his reflection in the glass door, doubt gnawed at him. The truth was glaring. His sneakers, old and worn, felt like a joke, a reminder of everything he feared. Emma's voice echoed through the courtyard, snapping him back to reality. She stood in the middle of a group of friends, her laughter ringing out like wind chimes, and at that moment Jake felt smaller than ever. Another round of laughter followed, and Jake's heart sank. He could feel every pair of eyes turning toward him, some with amusement, others with curiosity. What hurt the most was the irony of it all. Emma was everything he wasn't: popular, confident, and always dressed impeccably. As they continued laughing, Jake felt the heat rising to his cheeks, a familiar sting that followed mockery, and he turned away, forcing himself to breathe. Jake had always wanted to change things at school. He dreamed of a community where no one felt invisible, where everyone's voice mattered, even if they wore shoes like his. With resolve building in his chest, he decided he wouldn't let the laughter stop him. Today was the day he would run for president. As he made his way through the crowded hallways, he could hear murmurs and whispers. Jake, he felt a mixture of disbelief and support as he approached his friends. Tommy encouraged, clapping him on the back, but behind that encouragement, Jake sensed uncertainty. Jake shrugged off the doubt, focusing instead on the ideas racing through his mind. He spent the next few days drafting his speech, pouring everything he believed into it. "I want to create a school where everyone feels included," he penned late at night, fingers flying over the keyboard. The day of the election debate arrived, and the gymnasium was alive with energy. Banners hung from the rafters, each candidate's face smiling down from enormous posters. When it was Jake's turn to speak, he felt a strange mixture of nerves and exhilaration. Standing before his peers, he took a deep breath, grounding himself in his worn sneakers. In front of a buzzing crowd, he began, "Hi, I'm Jake." As he continued, he shared his vision of inclusivity, the laughter from earlier fading away as students began to listen. He felt a palpable shift, heads turned, and a few students nodded. The applause that followed wasn't uproarious, but it was there, tentative but genuine. Stepping back from the podium, Jake felt a spark. Maybe he could do this. But as the school days turned into weeks and the election loomed closer, doubt crept back in. Emma and her friends were often the loudest in the hallways, rallying support with confident smiles and spirited chants. They would yell, their enthusiasm palpable, and Jake felt the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders again. The day of the voting finally arrived, buzzing with electricity. The gym was packed with students, eyes filled with hope and anticipation. Jake stood off to the side, watching the ballots being cast, anxiety swirling in his stomach. What would happen? Did anyone really see him, or was he just a footnote in a popularity contest? When it came time for the results, the principal took to the stage, and anticipation hung thick in the air. Silence followed his name, and just for a moment, time froze. Then the gym erupted into applause and cheers. Jake's heart raced as he moved toward the stage, disbelief turning into overwhelming joy. Maybe this was the moment where everything changed. He shouted into the microphone, electricity coursing through him, "This isn't just about me." The crowd cheered, but somewhere in the back he spotted Emma. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of surprise and something darker swirling in her gaze. As the applause settled down, Jake stepped back, realizing he was not just the kid in scuffed shoes anymore. He had a responsibility. As the weeks rolled on, Jake embraced his role. He held meetings, gathered students' ideas, and slowly began to implement changes that would create a sense of community. Clubs were formed, events were organized, and voices that had once been muffled began to resonate within the walls of Valley Ridge High. However, not everything was easy. Emma found herself voicing her frustration during meetings. "These ideas are great," she said one day, "but what about tradition? We can't just throw everything away." Jake felt the tension grow like a storm cloud over the group. "Emma, we're not losing our spirit, we're evolving it." He wanted them to see that change didn't have to be scary. It didn't have to eliminate the essence of what they loved, it could enhance it. But as he spoke those words, he noticed Emma turning away, arms crossed tightly against her chest. Despite the rising tension, Jake found allies among students who were seeking change. One afternoon, a girl approached him, her eyes bright. "You're really making a difference, Jake." That glimmer of hope fueled his fire, compelling him to move forward despite the challenges that awaited him. Slowly, unity began to emerge, the shadows shifting as laughter transformed from taunts into encouragement. That morning, students poured into the halls, wearing their wildest outfits, showcasing colorful expressions of who they were. Jake stood at the entrance, welcoming everyone, pumped with anticipation. But suddenly, as he glanced around, he noticed Emma standing off to the side, her expression etched with uncertainty. He took a deep breath and approached her. "Hey," he said with encouraging warmth. "I don't know if I fit in with this," Emma replied, hesitation creeping into her voice. "Come on. We're here to celebrate everything that makes us unique." For a moment, Emma looked torn, but slowly a hesitant smile emerged. "Okay." As they celebrated together with everyone else, Jake realized that the journey they'd taken had shifted both of them, not just him. Laughter filled the air, accompanied by a sense of unity that they had been working toward. That shared joy opened a new dialogue. The conversations continued to flow, and the school transformed. Students gathered around the idea of collaboration. The walls of misunderstanding came tumbling down, paving the way for growth and healing. Slowly, a rhythm developed within the school, one that resonated with empathy and understanding. One day, under the swaying branches of the cherry blossom tree outside, Jake found a quiet moment and Emma approached him. She asked, her tone sincere. "Of course," Jake replied, feeling a mixture of curiosity and concern. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," Emma began, her voice steady. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. "It's okay, Emma, I get it. Change is tough." They shared a quiet moment under the branches, allowing new ideas to flow, their differences now opportunities rather than obstacles. With each conversation, they built trust and understanding, a partnership blossoming amid the challenges. As the end of the school year approached, Valley Ridge had transformed. The atmosphere now hummed with vibrant energy and camaraderie. Jake watched as friendships formed and students, once isolated, began intertwining their lives. Jake had the honor of leading Unity Week, a series of events celebrating diversity, creativity, and connection. The gym transformed into a mini festival filled with booths, activities showcasing cultures, talents, and passions. Laughter echoed everywhere, hence of former insecurities faded into the background. As he stepped onto the stage that day, Jake's heart raced with pride. He declared. The crowd erupted into cheers, a powerful testament to the unity they had forged, but it was more than the triumph of one individual. It resonated through every student's experience. They had learned how to lift each other up. They understood what it meant to genuinely listen and connect. In the center of the crowd stood Emma, now brimming with energy as she joined Jake on stage. "I used to think change was a threat," she admitted, her voice amplified through the microphone. Their eyes met, and in that moment everything crystallized. Those shoes, once an object of ridicule, had transformed into symbols of resilience and strength. They had carried him through all the challenges, through laughter and tears, and had played an integral role in this journey. As the day unfolded, Jake realized something profound. Laughter and joy could coexist with vulnerability and strength. The journey they had shared became a tapestry woven from their collective experiences, no longer held together by moments of ridicule, but by the powerful connections built in trust, acceptance, and love. Eventually, the bell rang, signaling the end of Unity Week, but Jake felt that this was just the beginning. They had created a culture that resonated with kindness, where everyone felt they belonged. As he left the school that day, the sunset painted the sky with shades of orange and purple. He turned and glanced back one last time. He was filled with gratitude for where he had been and the path they had forged together. Every step Jake took, whether in sneakers or polished shoes, was now grounded in an understanding that everyone, regardless of backgrounds or appearances, had their own story waiting to be told. And in that realization, he found not just his own voice, but a chorus of voices that resonated, strong and united, within the hearts of everyone at Valley Ridge High. Jake stood by the school entrance, his heart racing as he watched the students pour out after the final bell. It was a typical Friday, but for him, today felt critical. The pivotal moment he had been waiting for was finally here. As he watched a group of students chatting and laughing, one voice rang out distinctly above the others. Emma scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. Her friends giggled around her. Jake's stomach dropped. The laughter sliced through the air like a knife, and he felt every pair of eyes zero in on him. He glanced down at his beloved but worn sneakers. They had walked with him through countless adventures, but now they felt like a heavy anchor dragging him down. Maybe I should just turn around and go home, he thought, but then he remembered why he was there. He was running for student council president, a chance to change the very culture that defined Valley Ridge High, where the most important thing shouldn't be what shoes you wore, but who you were inside. Taking a deep breath, Jake stepped forward, determined not to let Emma's laughter derail him. He couldn't let them see his fear. He had a mission, and he was going to run for president, regardless of what they thought about his shoes. The following week was a whirlwind. Jake spent late nights writing his speech, fueled by that laughter echoing in his mind. He crafted lines about inclusivity, about how every student should feel valued no matter what they wore. "This is my chance," he kept telling himself. The day of the debate arrived, and the gymnasium was alive with energy. Banners hung from the ceiling, each candidate's nervous smile plastered on a poster. When it was Jake's turn to speak, he felt the weight of all those skeptical eyes watching him. But this time he was ready. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jake," he began, his voice steady. "I know I'm not the typical candidate." He looked out at the crowd, searching for familiar faces, and started to feel a shift. "We can make Valley Ridge a place where everyone feels they belong, a place where the quiet voices are heard." As he continued, he could see some students nodding, even a few clapping. The laughter he once felt echoed in his ears began to fade away, replaced with an undercurrent of hope. When he finished, Jake stepped down, heart soaring. Maybe this could actually happen, he thought, riding the wave of a newfound confidence. But with each passing day, doubt crept back in, especially every time Emma and her friends strolled past him, their laughter echoing like a storm cloud hanging overhead. Declared the principal on election day, her voice cutting through the tension that thickened in the air. Students filed into the gym, excitement buzzing like a live wire. Jake's heart raced. This was it. This vote would determine not just his fate, but the direction of their school. When the principal announced it was time to count the ballots, the anticipation felt electric. Was it going to be him or would it be Emma? The moment dragged on, the silence thick enough to cut. Then finally the principal spoke again, and the new president of Valley Ridge High is. A wave of disbelief washed over him, and for a moment he thought he might faint. Cheers erupted around him, blending with applause and shouts of joy. Jake found himself at the center of that frantic energy, feeling the warmth and validation wrap around him like a blanket. He shouted into the microphone, trying to capture the moment. As he stepped back, a quick glance revealed Emma no longer laughing, her expression one of surprise. Weeks went by. Jake threw himself into his presidency, rallying support and gathering students' ideas. The energy around Valley Ridge transformed as clubs formed and activities blossomed. Students began to find their voices, and the sense of community flourished like a garden blooming in spring. But even amidst this growth, Jake felt growing tensions with Emma. One day, during a student council meeting, she spoke up. "These changes are great, but we need to keep some traditions." "I understand where you're coming from, Emma," Jake replied, trying to maintain calm, "but we can't ignore the voices of those who feel left out." But Emma shook her head, the frustration evident in her expression as she closed off, arms crossed. The divide became more pronounced, leaving Jake unsure how to bridge the gap between them. As time passed, their meetings became more tense. Although Jake had earned the title of president, it became clear he had inherited a battle between tradition and evolution. It was frustrating to feel so close yet so far, and Jake often found himself wondering how to lead a school that thrived on growth when faced with someone reluctant to bend. Then came the day of Unity Week, an event Jake had planned to celebrate diversity and cooperation. He hoped to prove that they could embrace change while still honoring tradition. But when he arrived at the planning meeting, he found Emma standing in the corner, looking upset. Jake approached her, hoping to connect. "I just feel like we're losing what made our school special," she admitted, her voice raw with emotion. "It's supposed to be about our roots, our traditions." "I get that," Jake replied, a gentle resolve rising in his chest. "But our roots should be deep enough to grow right. Isn't it possible for us to remember where we came from while reaching for more?" Emma seemed to consider his words, and as she did, the wall between them started to crumble just a little. "Maybe you're right," she said slowly. Unity Week arrived like a burst of sunlight after a long winter, and the energy was palpable. Students filled the halls, each wearing bright colors and expressing identities that shimmered. Jake stood at the entrance, welcoming everyone who walked through with a smile. But as he looked for Emma, he found her standing alone, watching the festivities. He approached her again, this time with hope. "You should really join us." She hesitated for a moment, but finally stepped into the crowd beside him. As they laughed and danced with fellow students, the atmosphere shifted once more. This time, Emma began to see things through a different lens. Change wasn't a threat, it was an opportunity for growth. "Tonight, we'll have a rally," Jake announced to the crowd as they gathered in the gym for the culminating event. As stories flowed, students spoke about their identities, their struggles, their dreams. They celebrated each story, and as Emma listened, she realized just how powerful every voice could be. It was a moment of unity that felt genuine, one that she had longed for. Standing on the stage during the rally, Jake introduced Emma, inviting her to share her journey. He said, clapping along with the crowd. She stepped up nervously, but as she began to share, the crowd listened intently. "I used to think change meant losing what I loved," she confessed. The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time, Emma felt embraced by something far greater than herself. After that night, the transformation between Jake and Emma deepened. Together, they worked to find balance, embracing tradition while expanding their horizons. They created spaces for debate and dialogue, inviting every student to share their thoughts, fostering open communication. As the school year reached its end, Jake reflected on how far they had come, not just as president, but as a community. They had finally come together, weaving the stories of every student into a vibrant tapestry of connection. On the final day of school, Jake found himself standing under the cherry blossom tree where they had once shared their fears. Students gathered around him, excited chatter bubbling in the air. "This year has been incredible," Jake began, his voice steady, filled with gratitude. The crowd erupted with cheers and clapping, their faces glowing with connection. "Change isn't easy," he continued, "but when we face those challenges together, we emerge stronger, richer, and more united." A wave of warmth swept through him as the cheers picked up again, and amidst the faces, he found Emma's smile, bright and genuine. She had become not only an ally but a friend, standing alongside him in celebration of everything they had built together. As they embraced unity, Jake finally realized the significance of those old sneakers he had once doubted. They symbolized resilience, growth, and the journey he had taken, both to find his voice and to help lift others. Every step he took, every word he spoke, carried with it the weight of transformation, the growth of not just one individual but a community that embraced change with open arms. The sun began to set, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the sky, and Jake felt grateful for every laugh, every story shared, and every challenge overcome. In that moment, he understood that laughter could lead to connection, and connections could lead to real change. As Jake looked out at his friends, at the vibrant tapestry of stories surrounding him, he knew that together they had woven something extraordinary, a community defined not by shoes but by the strength of their voices and the power of their hearts. Jake stood at the edge of the school courtyard, heart pounding, as he watched the other kids filter into the building. Laughter and chatter swirled around him like the first stirrings of a summer storm. It was a crisp Friday morning, and today marked the start of the student council elections. He could already see Emma, the queen bee of their high school, strutting across the pavement in her designer outfit and shiny shoes that gleamed in the sunlight. Her laughter rang out loud and clear, slicing through the crowd. She exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Jake felt heat rush to his cheeks. He glanced down at his own shoes-worn-out sneakers with scuffs that told stories of countless adventures. They had seen better days, but they were comfortable, and he loved them. But in that moment, all he could feel was the weight of ridicule sinking down on him. What was he doing here, planning to run for president? Could a kid in sneakers ever hope to compete with someone like Emma? He envisioned a better school, a place where every voice mattered. But how could he convince them to listen when Emma's laughter echoed in his ears, making him feel as insignificant as a grain of sand? With determination flickering inside him, Jake made his way to his locker. Today was different. He was going to take a stand. He couldn't keep hiding behind his sneakers anymore. In the coming days, he spent hours drafting his speech for the big debate. He wanted to be honest. His words had to matter. Every stroke of the pen felt like breaking chains, each word a declaration of his intent. When the day of the debate finally arrived, the gymnasium buzzed with energy. Banners hung from the ceiling, flickering with promises of friendship and fun. As Jake watched the other candidates step forward in their tailored suits and polished shoes, he felt doubt creeping back in. But as he took a breath, he reminded himself of his vision. "Hey, everyone." His voice emerged steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. As he spoke, he saw students leaning in, paying attention. "Let's bring in clubs tailored to what you love, more art, more music, and more spaces where we can learn from one another." He drew strength from the nods and smiles in the audience, and as he finished, his heart soared. There was applause, scattered but genuine, and for a fleeting moment he felt powerful, like maybe he could pull this off. But as days passed, the excitement began to fade. Doubt hung over him like a curtain, and there was Emma, always the star, surrounded by her loyal fans. She said one day, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Her friends erupted into laughter, and for a moment Jake felt the air leave his lungs. It was painful, but it reminded him why he was fighting. This was bigger than him, bigger than any pair of shoes. He would push through the laughter and doubts. He had to. The day of the voting arrived, excitement thrumming through the air like electricity. Students hustled into the gym, chatting and laughing, and the energy was infectious. But as the votes were counted, anticipation hung thick. The principal started, her eyes scanning the eager crowd. His heart stopped, the applause swept over him, a flood of unexpected joy. As his name echoed in the high school gym, he felt disbelief wash over him. Did they mean it? Was he really standing there? He shouted, unable to contain the surge of emotion. "This is for everyone." But as cheers erupted around him, he caught Emma's gaze, and in that moment he saw determination flash across her face. The cheers filled the air, but the weight of their rivalry loomed large. While students celebrated, Jake felt a chill of uncertainty flutter deep inside him. Could he really change anything? Days turned into weeks of hard work, and the initial excitement began to settle. Jake set to work organizing events and gathering ideas, but conflict began to arise. Emma had her own vision and was determined to clash with his. "You can't just change everything, Jake. There are traditions we shouldn't throw away," Emma argued in a meeting, her tone firm with conviction. "We can evolve, Emma. Jake replied, trying to maintain control over the situation. But the tension simmered beneath the surface, and every confrontation chiseled away at his confidence. As Jake pushed forward with plans for a school spirit event, he noticed Emma's followers rallying behind her. It felt like a tidal wave about to crash. One afternoon, while mulling over the details of an upcoming project, a fellow student approached him, eyes bright. "Jake, I heard her talking about how you're ruining everything." His heart sank. Trying to create a place for everyone, he insisted, but doubts gnawed at him. Would Emma's idea of tradition trump his vision of inclusion? The battle felt exhausting, and he had no idea how to navigate it. Then came the day of the school spirit event. So many emotions washed over him as he stood on stage, adrenaline coursing through his veins. As he looked out into the crowd, he spotted Emma crossing her arms, a disapproving frown on her face. Anxiety crept over him, but he pushed it aside. He shouted, but the enthusiasm that had once surged in his chest felt muted. He could feel Emma's gaze weighing on him, the pressure building like an unwelcome storm. As the event unfolded, Jake kept pushing through individual conversations, trying to engage those who felt lost in the crowd. He looked out to see students sharing laughter and connecting, but doubts whispered louder in his mind. Would it all be enough? Just when Jake thought the day was turning around, a group of Emma's friends started shouting over him. "What's wrong with you?" The laughter turned from joy to mockery, and Jake felt his heart shatter. But then he spotted a few students standing together, ones that had felt invisible for far too long. Their eyes gleamed with determination and camaraderie. Inspired by their evening, Jake felt a rush of courage. Jake called out, cutting through the cacophony. The noise hushed momentarily, and he seized the opportunity. "This is not a circus, it's about bringing us together. It's about creating space where everyone's voice is important." Jake could feel the energy shifting, the crowd slowly beginning to turn back toward unity as they cheered him on. The laughter of his supporters drowned out the whispers of doubt, pulling him back into the moment. When the event wrapped up, Jake felt renewed, ready to rise above the noise. Yet the conflict with Emma loomed heavy in his mind, like a storm cloud he couldn't shake. Days passed, and every encounter felt charged with friction. One afternoon, as Jake walked through the halls, heads turned and whispers sprang forth. The weight of Emma's laughter haunted him, morphing into anxiety. Then out of the blue, he overheard a group of students discussing Emma's plans. "I heard she's going to run against him next year," one said. The words sent a jolt through Jake. The storm was brewing again, and he knew he had to face it head-on. Determined to confront Emma, Jake waited for her at the edge of the school grounds. When she finally arrived, he took a deep breath. "We need to talk," he said, urgency lacing his voice. Emma rolled her eyes, looking as if she had no interest in hearing him out. "What's there to talk about, Jake?" "Emma, this is about all of us." He felt fire igniting in his gut as he spoke. "I know you care about this school too." For a moment, Emma hesitated, her expression softening just a touch, but then shaking her head, she turned away. "You can't change who we are." She stormed off down the hallway, leaving Jake with a sinking feeling in his chest. Would she always see him as a threat? Did he have the strength to help their school evolve for the better, or were they destined to clash in a never-ending cycle of rivalry? Time ticked on, and the final days of school loomed closer. Graduation was just around the corner, and Jake reflected on the changes he had fought for. It didn't matter how old his sneakers were, he knew he had pushed for a more inclusive environment. Yet the tension with Emma still simmered, and he could feel the weight of her expectation like iron chains. Would she turn against him? Would she sway the board and undermine everything he had worked for? With the upcoming vote on the board's final proposals for next year, he knew that everything was hanging by a thread. The auditorium filled with students and members of the faculty as they prepared for one last showdown. Jake stepped onto the stage, and the applause felt weak at first, slowly building with each deliberate step. This was it, where his world could shift one way or another, much like those sneakers that had been a constant reminder of who he was. As he looked out at the crowd, he saw Emma and her clique sitting in the front row. The fire in her eyes burned bright, and he knew she had her plan ready, but he was determined to stand tall. "Thank you all for being here today," Jake began, choosing his words carefully. This year has been a journey of growth, but as he spoke, he saw the board shifting uncomfortably. Would his efforts crumble? Would Emma's laughter echo louder than his hopes? His voice grew earnest as he addressed the crowd. "We need to embrace change instead of fearing it." The tension in the room thickened with whispers spanning the audience. He sent out a desperate look, hoping for some sign of support. Then Jake spotted a student's hand rise, one who had been quiet all year. They shouted, breaking through the noise. That one voice breathed life back into him as others joined in, a swell of support coiling through the crowd. For a moment, the storm of doubt began to disperse. Just as Jake thought he had gained solid footing, Emma tore through the crowd, charging towards the stage. She shouted, her anger palpable. "This isn't how things should be." Jake turned to face her, his heart racing. "But what we know isn't working for everyone. We can be more." The board looked to each other, and he could almost hear the gears turning. The tension ignited as Emma raised her voice, desperately seeking the approval of her followers. But in that moment, he understood something profound. Change would always be met with resistance, but it didn't mean it was wrong. The energy crackled in the room as votes were cast, each one a turning point hanging in the balance. Jake's heart hammered in his chest, knowing that what lay ahead could redefine everything, not just for him, but for the entire student body. Jake's breath caught in his throat. This moment was the culmination of everything: the ridicule, the struggle, and the hope. Would they embrace his vision for change, or would they fall back into the comfortable shadows of the past? The tension hung heavily like a storm cloud overhead. In that breathless second, Jake realized the stakes were higher than he could have imagined, as uncertainty coiled around his heart like a vice. His mind raced, desperate for an answer. As the room fell silent, every soul poised on the edge of their seat. Jake knew this was just the beginning of everything he had ever fought for. What would happen next would transform the course of his life forever. Would they support his vision for change, or would Emma's laughter echo once again, leaving his dreams scattered like the soles of his worn-out shoes? Only time would tell, but for Jake, either way, everything was about to change.